You know, we're surrounded by all this amazing technology that we just take for granted. But if you've ever stopped to think about the very first time someone tried to make it work, because let me tell you, that first draft, it is almost never pretty. Today, we're diving into some of history's wildest test runs, the messy, the brave, and the straight-up hilarious first attempts that paved the way for the world we know.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. What in the world do nearly naked balloonists, an exploding lamp, and a bucket of sheep's blood all have in common? I know, it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But believe me, the actual answer is somehow even stranger.
And the answer is, they were all daring, dangerous, and sometimes kind of ridiculous first attempts at progress. They prove that the path to innovation is never a straight line. Nope, it's usually a bumpy, chaotic, and occasionally undignified journey.
So here's the countdown for today. We've got the naked balloonists, an exploding lamp, a vomiting daredevil. You get the picture. We're going to cover a lot of ground, so let's just jump right in.
Kicking things off at number 5, we have the story of the very first international flight. And it stars two guys who set out to make history, which they did, but they also almost lost their pants and their lives in the process.
So picture this. It's January 7th, 1785. Our two pioneers, Blanchard and Jeffries, are floating high above the English Channel in a beautiful gas-powered balloon. Everything is going perfectly. They're on track to be the first people to ever fly from one country to another. But then, about an hour and a half in, the balloon starts sinking. Fast. And they realize, uh-oh, we've run out of ballast to throw overboard.
And this is where the pure panic kicks in. They start throwing everything they can find overboard. First to go, all their expensive scientific instruments. Then their food and supplies. Still sinking. So what's left? Well, their clothes. I'm not kidding. They start stripping down in the freezing cold air. And when that's not enough, in a final act of utter desperation, they, relieved themselves over the side. And that 5 pounds of jettisoned urine, believe it or not, gave them just enough lift to clear the trees and land safely in France. In their underwear. What a way to make an entrance.
All right, coming in at number 4, an invention designed to bring order and save lives on the chaotic streets of 1860s London. The only tiny problem, it ended up taking a life instead.
And to really understand why they needed this so badly, you have to get how insane Victorian London traffic was. Just look at this. You were literally about 3 times more likely to die in a traffic accident back then than you are driving in modern-day LA. The streets were an absolute death trap.
So this railway manager, John Peake Knight, had a brilliant idea. He figured, hey, we use signals to control trains, why not horse-drawn carriages? So he designed this thing with big arms for the daytime and a gas-powered red and green lamp for night. And the whole operation was run by a single police officer standing right underneath it.
And you know what? It actually worked. Londoners started to appreciate the new sense of order. The invention was a total success for exactly 1 month.
And then, catastrophe. A gas line feeding the lamp leaked, and the whole thing exploded, tragically killing the police officer operating it. The city was so horrified that Parliament had it removed immediately, and London wouldn't dare try another traffic light for more than 60 years.
Okay, for our next story, we're heading up way up, from the streets of London to 3,000 feet in the air above Paris, with a man who was not only the inventor of the parachute, but also, very bravely, its very first test pilot.
So back in 1797, France was absolutely obsessed with hot air balloons. And this one guy, André-Jacques Garnerin, wanted to make a name for himself. His big stunt? He would ascend to 3,000 feet over Paris in a balloon and then just cut his parachute loose and fall. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, for starters, his equipment was, let's just say, a little primitive. He wasn't strapped in with a harness or anything, he was just standing in a small basket. And the parachute itself was basically a giant silk umbrella with no frame. And that design had a huge flaw. It was guaranteed to spin like crazy. So sure enough, as soon as he cut the rope, the parachute started to spin, violently, faster and faster, until the basket was swinging out almost parallel to the ground. This led to what might be the world's first documented case of air sickness, because Garnerin got so dizzy that he became violently ill all over himself on the way down.
But hey, he landed safely, a bit smelly and dizzy, but the crowd absolutely loved it. Now, as wild as that was, our next first attempt wasn't a public spectacle. Oh no.
It was a top-secret military weapon in the American Revolutionary War, and it was, for all intents and purposes, an underwater coffin.
All right, for number 2, we're heading to 1776. The American forces are getting hammered by the British Navy, which has New York Harbor completely blockaded. They're desperate. So they decide to deploy a brand new, top-secret invention to sink the British flagship.
Let's meet the turtle. This bizarre egg-shaped thing was made of oak and, get this, it was powered by one guy inside turning cranks and pedals. And the pilot only had about 30 minutes of breathable air. Just try to imagine that. It's like riding a stationary bike inside a dark, sealed barrel at the bottom of a harbor. The pilot, a sergeant named Ezra Lee, actually made it to the British ship, the HMS Eagle, completely undetected. An amazing feat. But when he tried to attach the bomb, he ran into a problem. He had to use a hand-crank drill to screw it into the ship's hull, but the British had recently plated their ships with copper. His drill just couldn't get through. With his air running out, he had to abandon the mission and pedal for his life.
And now, for our number 1 spot, we have a story that has it all. Intense medical rivalry, extremely questionable science, and, yes, animal blood. This is where it gets really weird.
So it's the 1660s, and doctors are just starting to figure out how blood circulation even works. A French physician, Jean-Baptiste Denis, was being mocked by the medical establishment in Paris, and he decided to do something so radical they'd have to take him seriously: perform the first human blood transfusion. His plan? Use the blood from a lamb, which he thought was purer than human blood. And remember, this is long before anyone had any clue about blood types.
And at first, it seemed to be a miracle. His first patient, a teenage boy, was supposedly cured. But his luck ran out fast. After a few more patients, he takes on a man named Antoine Moroy, gives him an infusion of calf's blood, and the man dies. Denis goes from medical pioneer to being charged with manslaughter.
But the trial had an absolutely stunning twist. As the court investigated, they discovered that while Denis's procedure was, incredibly dangerous, it's not what killed the patient. The actual cause of death was arsenic poisoning. And the person who poisoned him? His own wife, who was apparently trying to frame the doctor to get away with murder.
Denis was cleared of the murder, but his reputation was completely ruined. In fact, the whole practice was banned in France for nearly 200 years. It just leaves you with this one final thought. All of these first attempts seem completely nuts to us today, right? But these were pioneers working at the absolute edge of what was known. So it makes you wonder, what are we test running right now that people in 200 years will look back on and think we were absolutely, completely insane?